Alrighty, guys. We are back in broadcasting.
You have no viewers. You have no viewers.
I got not a single viewer. Anywhere?
Can you see up there at the top?
Yep, I see the 0.
They'll get notifications, start putting back in.
Nobody loves us. Nobody's watching us. We're still getting messages pop up over here.
Yeah, weird.
Here we are, back yet. Oh, 4 of you. Guys, welcome back. Sorry about the technical difficulties. We're going to basically wait just a second, start scrolling through some time, waiting for the rest of these guys to log back on. Sorry about the little StreamYard faux pas there. Beyond our capabilities. You know, Bill, Ernie, and JW back there, those guys are the best at what they do. So when something like this happens, I can rest assured it's not their fault. If I was back there, that'd be a different story because I probably have no idea what button I was pushing. But we keep popping up there, getting a few more. You know, when we start talking about these things, you know, Ernie's got his own little farm going on back there. And, you know, he was walking past, you know, the hen house and they kept following him. And so that's why Ernie thinks he's a chick magnet, but we're not going to go there. So that was the bad joke. We're not. See, we're stalling. We're killing time, making up bad jokes. But yes, he does really think he is a chick magnet, though. We don't have the heart to tell him otherwise. Yeah, we do. Hey, let's do that. Like while we're waiting, let's run a Steve Barber video with his awesome new demo vehicle. We'll have more pictures on that near the end of the show. So why don't you go ahead and fire that video up if you got it handy, guys, and let's watch a cool Steve Barber video. And this is one that I actually haven't even seen yet. So bring it on, Bill. Let's see this video. Magnet for string. That's awesome. Steve, that was a great comment too. Too much magnet for StreamYard. In that video, it looked like it blew all the hair off your head. Yeah, I kind of have that same problem myself. So that's why yeah, it can't do hair tricks if you don't have hair. We could glue some on, but yeah, that would be tacky. Wigs, there we go, the wig tricks anyway. So guys, keep asking your questions. Keep posting those up. We'll get back to those as soon as we can. But as we start to talk, Yep. Ernie says that he's lost all the questions thanks to the little dropping of StreamYard. So if you haven't got your question answered, throw it back up there, and those guys will throw it up to me, or Bill will get to you after the show, and he and I will converse and answer those questions. But talking about magnetic energy, anything you put, like, you know, in any circuit that's got a parasitic draw is going to affect the performance. So that's why for speakers that are really looking for, you know, high sensitivity, you know, cost effectiveness, we'll monitor every part of that magnetic circuit. And believe it or not, the cast aluminum basket up here does two things on this Solo X woofer. First of all, the cast aluminum is very strong. It's not necessarily stronger than steel. It looks like it because it's thicker, but it is very strong. Second of all, it's lighter than steel unless it's cast versus, you know, stamped steel. That there's not really a big weight savings there. But most importantly, the cast aluminum basket, by bolting that basket to that top plate, is not going to have any parasitic draw of the magnetic energy. So we're not going to lose the magnetic energy into the basket. So we actually gain about 1 dB of sensitivity to the speaker. That's 1 dB louder with the same amount of power, just because the magnet is not being affected by the basket. So another very important design aspect. When you get into smaller speakers such as we have in front of me, you really have so much magnetic energy, it's really not a huge benefit to go to cast aluminum. A lot of times that adds thickness and it adds a lot more cost to these speakers, which we're basically trying to make as, you know, good and as affordable as possible. I mean, there's always trade-offs. So you can always make something better, but at what cost? Is it going to be, a competitive product in the marketplace? And that's one of the things we look at very closely. We want to give you guys the maximum bang for the buck, the maximum performance without draining your wallet to the extent that it hurts when you have to go buy it. So what other questions we got, JW? Why don't you bring up another one and see what we can come up with. See who's got some cool questions, because some of these questions actually really get me to thinking and going to get me like doing a lot more research to find out more. The magnetic, great. I love the screen names. Will there ever be a line made in the USA? They used to all be made over here, as a matter of fact. And I would have to say yes, things are changing quite rapidly in the manufacturing process. We used to have a lot of speakers. In fact, there's a company in Florida called Credence that used to make all our woofers till they just became not cost effective in the marketplace. And there were a few other issues with quality control that we stepped in and said, hey, we need to look elsewhere. But there's no reason why we can't do speakers, product lines in the U.S. It's just all about cost. I mean, we could absolutely make everything in the U.S., but the cost would probably be so astronomical they wouldn't be competitive. Now, what's really cool, if you guys look that way, which is to your right and my left, about a mile from here, there's a factory that's going in place that is going to make neomagnets. I mean, how ironic is that? They took over the World Color Press that they used to do all the Walmart flyers, the Kmart flyers, the Easy Rider magazine. It was a printing press. This company's taken over that building, and they're going to start making neomagnets right here in Stillwater. Now, they're mostly for industrial use. They're not going to be for our speakers, but that is kind of ironic, kind of cool. But they'll be making neomagnets a mile from our facility. So how awesome is that? So, another speaker we have up here, and we haven't talked about it, is our KMXL speaker. This is a really, really interesting speaker. So if you guys don't know a lot about these, and of course, we're always about, self-promotion, but that's not necessarily the reason why I have this here. It is a great sounding speaker and really cool. This speaker has two independent motor structures. It's got a motor structure for the mid-range, and it's got a motor structure for the compression driver, which uses that 1.4-inch aluminum diaphragm that's on the back side. But what we do at this speaker versus, say, the Solo X here. The Solo X, you've got a top plate and a gap, and then the center pole piece. The back plate is solid. So what we're doing with the KMXL line of speakers, which are the 8-inch, the 6.5, and the 6x9, is we actually put another gap on the back plate and put another voice coil and motor assembly on the back side of that magnet structure. So we're actually using one magnet, but it's a dual motor. It's really kind of unique. Good grief, I just made a mess. I wondered what that noise was. That was me dumping the water. Hey, we're going to blame Steven because Steven said, put your water behind the woofer. So, yep. So we're going to set it off to this side, so hopefully we won't knock it over again. Hey, it's only water. We got enough of that outside, I think. But the dual motor single magnet speaker is actually really cool. The biggest advantage for that is the fact we don't have to have a whole nother magnet structure making this speaker another 1.5 inches deep. And it saves a whole lot of weight because these things are usually mounted in fiberglass in a boat. The more weight you put on, the more it's going to stress that fiberglass and can actually crack it over time, especially with as rough of a ride that speakers get in a boat. So that is another really unique motor design, and the way it uses the magnets is actually really cool. So once again, single magnet dual motor in the KMXL drivers. So next cool question, guys. What do we got coming up for another cool question? Here we are. Brian Johnson again says, odd question. So my daughter has a pacemaker and she's supposed to avoid magnets so they don't interfere with this pacemaker. How far does a magnetic field on a subwoofer extend? There's really no good answer to that. It really depends on the strength of the magnet. An MRI, you guys know what an MRI machine is? Magnetic Resonant Imaging. That's MRI. I think that's what they stand for. But those magnets are so strong, you can't have any metal in the room. I've actually seen where they actually pull chairs from across the room into the machine. So I can't say specifically. I mean, it really would depend on magnet and product to product as how far it would affect a pacemaker. But, when it comes to somebody's life, I don't think that's something you want to test. I know I sure wouldn't, and I don't suggest it. But just, follow the doctor's guidelines. And yes, I mean, the magnetic basically affects all forms of electricity, and electricity affects all forms of magnetism. So they go hand in hand. So, obviously they're not going to be ultra sensitive, but you get something really powerful like the magnet force and motor structure of this speaker, that may cause problems. And in fact, kind of interesting, we start talking about the BL of a speaker. That's the force of the magnetic energy. The original Solo X 18-inch woofer, when it came out, had a BL of 40, which was kind of amazing because the closest competitor at that time had a BL of 22, which that company's still around. They still make great speakers. But yeah, the original Solo X woofer had a BL of 40, almost double what the nearest competitor was. That's why that thing was such a great speaker for SPL. And believe it or not, those things sounded good. Gary Biggs actually won World Champion Sound Quality in 2003 with a pair of those in the back of that Regal. And if you guys haven't seen that Regal, look that up online because what a beautiful install that was. So what other kinds of cool questions we got, JW? What do we got going on here? As he's scrolling through. Facebook user, now that's an original name. Come on, you can do better than that. What would the difference be if the Solo X had a Neo magnet? The biggest difference would be cost. I mean, that's the #1 reason. We could put a Neo magnet on the Solo X woofer, but the problem would be it would be a whole lot more expensive and we'd have to completely redesign the speaker. You can't just take, a ceramic magnet out and put Neo in place of it. Everything's got to work together. The biggest problem we have with Neo, once again, is the heat issue. Anything over 80 degrees Celsius is going to permanently affect the magnetic structure. Now, with like ceramics and the cobalts and the ferrite magnets, you can actually demag and remagnetize those speakers. And in fact, we've got a machine that's actually probably 50 feet away from us right now that we used to demag all the speakers before we rebuilt them, and then we'd remagnetize them. And in fact, there's a funny story that Dan Jobin, that hired me 27 years ago. Thank you for that, Dan. I love my job, or I wouldn't be here 27 years later. Dan was telling me a story, a little tech story, and I love some of these, off-the-wall tech stories. He said he had a guy call up and said, listen, I just had my speakers rebuilt, and they're not working. Dan's like, well, what seems to be the problem? The guy said, I don't know. He said, I wasn't getting any output. I checked the impedance of the voice coils. They all measured 4 ohms. Those were single voice coil speakers, 28, 29 years ago. But he said, all of them have 4 ohms. And Dan said, well, your amplifier's working. He said, yeah, I can turn the volume up and the lights dim on the amplifier and it's getting warm, but I've got no output. And Dan's thinking about it. Hey, grab a screwdriver and put it on the back of the speaker and tell me what happens. The guy came back and says, nothing happens. Dan said, well, there's your problem. He said, what do you mean? Nothing happened. Dan said, well, that is the problem. So apparently what happened is those 4 speakers that were rebuilt, they forgot to remagnetize them. So there was no longer that stationary magnetic field for the voice coil's magnetic field to push and pull against. So they had continuity, so they had resistance, they had 4 ohms. The amplifier is producing power into that voice coil, and of course it probably wouldn't play very long before it burned up because, once again, you have to trade that heat for motion, otherwise it'll burn up, or that magnetic energy into motion, otherwise it creates the heat and will burn up the speaker. So that's, one of those funny stories that weird things happen like that, and just do a little bit of common sense and think about it. Yep, nothing stuck to it. It's not magnetized anymore. That speaker's no longer a speaker. It's a very nice looking paperweight at that point. So kind of cool, fun stories. So what other questions we got? We're actually winding down the clock here at 8:30 tonight. I do have a guest we're going to bring up here in just a minute. So Brian Park, Brian, you are full of questions, if it's the same Brian Park, and appreciate that. I love all the questions. Does the magnet boot cover help with SPL? Not at all. So all this magnet boot is going to do is make that speaker look cooler and protect the magnet from chipping. It has nothing to do with heat. It has nothing to do with magnetism. It's made out of rubber. It does not conduct any magnetic energy. Therefore, it's not a parasitic draw. So it's literally there. We put that on there 98% just for cosmetics. So if you notice any of our preloaded enclosures that you buy, preloaded enclosures where it's already got our speaker in one of our pre-designed boxes that our engineers designed to match with that speaker specifically, if you pull one of those speakers out, the only difference between that and a production speaker is going to be the magnet boot and the cosmetic trim on the back. It does not affect performance having the magnet boot or not having the magnet boot. It just makes it look a lot cooler. But great question there, Brian. Thank you for that. All right. Bobby Burette, how you doing, Bobby? Thanks for joining us tonight, along with all the rest of you knuckleheads, and I say that passionately. I really appreciate you guys tuning in because we can't do this without you. Bobby says, John Myerson, thanks, he spelled my name right. What about when the magnets are larger than the woofer when you have to invert it? Yeah, that's another issue, and here again, it's all in the design of the speaker, and I know exactly what you're talking about. If this magnet was too large, it wouldn't fit through the hole. There is another way to do it, though. You could actually mount it from the backside, but you'd have to take the box apart. It all depends on the magnet structure, the way it's designed to work for the speaker. You can have the magnet be too big for the woofer. Once again, if you put too big of a magnet on a speaker, you actually lose output. So as long as it's designed properly and you can focus that magnetic energy into that gap, the more efficiently you can do that, the smaller the magnet has to be or can be, so you can get the same performance. But a lot of it out there, I know a lot of guys, in fact, I saw a comment a little bit earlier, so bigger magnets are better, they're louder because they're bigger. That's not necessarily true. I've seen several videos online where a guy will pull out a stock speaker out of a door versus an aftermarket. And look at the difference in this. Look at that puny little magnet versus this one. This one's so much better than that one. Well, maybe not necessarily, because that other one obviously was a neo magnet. And if it's properly designed and you've got a big ceramic magnet speaker like this and it's not, the little smaller neo magnet driver will definitely outperform a poorly designed larger magnet motor structure. So great question though, Bobby, but it's all in the design of the speaker, how that magnetic energy is focused into that magnetic gap, and the type of materials used. And once again, neo is absolutely fantastic material, but the downfalls are it's greatly affected by temperature, especially over 80 degrees Celsius. It's actually a lot more brittle. It shatters a lot easier. It has to be plated, and there's a cost, increase by using neo. And of course, there's a whole fact that almost all neo is controlled by China. So if something happens in the world market where they're no longer our friends, that's really going to affect the neo market, which is why they're going to start making neo right over here a mile away from us. So great question, Bobby. Thank you for that. So who else has got a great question? Wade Hensley asks, what advantage does more magnetic strength have? Is there a point of diminishing returns? Absolutely. More magnetic strength means you have a stronger pushing and pulling force. So yes, the bigger the magnet, but you get to a certain point where the magnet has so much control over that speaker, it actually overdamps it. It actually stops the speaker from moving, and you actually start to lose output. So there is definitely a point of diminishing returns, both by performance and by cost. Once again, just adding more stacks of magnet to make it stronger isn't going to do the trick. Every time you add another layer on there, you get less and less increase in magnetic performance. But the advantage is you get longer cone travel because I can now move farther because of the greater height in the area where the voice coil travels. So there is always, point of diminishing returns with everything. The more money you put into it doesn't necessarily always mean that much more improvement on the output. But great question. Thanks, Wade, for that one. SDK enclosures, appreciate what you guys do. You guys make some awesome products out there, and thanks for tuning in. Question, what's your opinion on electromagnetic subs, and what if you were to use a diode trio to rectify an AC current via an amplifier to charge the motor? Well, let's think about that for a minute, and that is an interesting question, and I did ask our acoustic engineer that exact question just for fun to see what he would come up with. We have got an absolutely brilliant guy that designs our speakers. Alan is an amazing guy, and he's the one I went to for a lot of this information. I got pages of stuff he wrote. But what it really comes down to is, a long time ago, back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, speakers were electromagnetic because the magnetic materials weren't efficient, weren't strong enough to get the job done. So they did use electromagnets in speakers back in the day. The problem is that anymore, we can get a lot more energy in the magnetic material. It's a lot more efficient and a lot more cost effective. But the biggest downfall, if you think about it, what is the problem with putting unlimited power in a vehicle? You only have so much to work with. Your batteries are only so big, your alternators are only so big, and you guys are putting, 4 runs of 1/aught wire into each amplifier, both power and ground. I mean, you get the maximum performance. So, and you're trying to get the maximum energy out of the batteries. What if you had to take half of that energy in the batteries and focus that into a speaker just to get a magnetic field? It's not very efficient and just not very cost effective. We had to do it back in, once again, the 40s and 50s with the older speakers because the magnetic materials weren't strong enough to get the job done, so they had to be done that way. In fact, a lot of the speakers had those 70-volt transformers on them that basically would change a high voltage signal at a low current into a low voltage, higher current signal to actually get the speaker to move. So yeah, electromagnetics are really cool. And the biggest advantage of electromagnet is you can turn that on and off. So just like you see with the cranes and the junkyards, they turn on the electromagnet, it picks up the metal, they shut the current off, and all the metal falls off. Well, once again, if you had an electromagnetic speaker, as the voltage would drop, so would your magnetic power. It would be very non-conducive to high SPL. But great question. So, electromagnets have their place, but just not anymore in audio. So, cool. Great question, though. I like the way you guys are thinking out there. All right, we're going to take one more question. They're going to move on to some housekeeping stuff and bring out my special guest. The last and final question, hopefully we won't have to make up an answer, is from Chris Vera. Can you run 3 channels of a 4-channel amplifier like the IQ with no issues? So let me reread that. So, can you run 3 channels of a 4-channel amplifier like the IQ with no issues? So if you're just talking running 3 speakers and leaving 1 channel idle, we do not recommend that with especially like an IQ or KX or KXMA amplifiers because they are full range Class D. Class D amplifiers need a speaker or a load on the output, otherwise they basically oscillate and can run into what they call thermal runaway. So any Class D amplifier needs to have a speaker or some type of load on all 4 channels. I recently did an install on a boat where we were planning on putting wake tower speakers on when he got his wake tower, but in the meantime we went ahead and put in an amplifier that would run those speakers. It was actually a 900.5, so we were running the 5th channel, the sub channel, to a subwoofer, but the 4 channels that were mid and high were not connected to any speakers at the time. So what I actually did is I went and got one of our KISS load 4s and I hooked that up to the outputs of the amplifier and ran no signal to it. So that Class D amplifier is always running and it's always producing power, so it needs something to bleed off that power just to keep it from overheating. And literally that KISS load on the output of that amplifier has kept it happy for about 1.5 years now. So hopefully this year he'll get his wake tower and get it going. So let's make that happen. So great question. So that being said, we're going to go to do some housekeeping here. I think is my special guest ready? Is he? There he is over there. I got to bring up, and you guys have seen him on the show before. Come on in here, Lauren. All right. Lauren, how you doing?
John, thank you.
Lauren is our most amazing road warrior. He actually does a lot of these events that we go out and do on the road that we can't get to. I don't know, how many miles a year do you log doing this for us?
Usually somewhere around 30 to 40,000 flying and 40 to 60 driving.
That's a lot of miles. That's 80,000 miles that Lauren travels for us.
Yeah.
And if you guys have never been to an event with Lauren, he does a great display. He's always high energy. And is there anybody you don't know at these events? Everybody knows Lauren at these events. You're such the road warrior.
Hey, it's all a part of living loud and repping the brand and being out there in front of people. And,
well, you definitely do that, right?
Trying to do things right for Team Kicker.
So I walked in the office this morning, was very pleasantly surprised to find Lauren standing there in front of Misty's desk. So what are you doing here in town? What brings you here? Not that I'm complaining. It's good to see you. You're on the road so much, I don't hardly ever see you unless I get to go work an event with you.
Right. That's the exciting part is last weekend we had round 6 of the Kicker AMA Arena Cross Championship Series. This weekend, mid-season, round 7, Friday night, Kicker AMA Arena Cross Championship Series right here in Guthrie, Oklahoma at the Lazy E Arena, which is the largest indoor equine arena in the country. So we're able to have an incredible show. It's massive, massive floor out there. I love the dirt, good old Oklahoma dirt. And
that's clay, that's not dirt.
The competition's fantastic. We hit round 7 and Guthrie this coming weekend, Friday. You can get your tickets right at the door. Get in there, come down, see me, say hi. The following weekend, we'll be in Prescott, Arizona.
That's a ways away.
Yeah.
What's that
and the weekend after that, Reno, Nevada. And then I think we have a couple weekends off, and then 3 rounds in Daytona.
Wow.
And then a couple weekends off, and we wrap the season up the 29th at where Kicker Arena Cross started, Orleans Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. So it's first time back there in 20-something years. Super excited to get the Kicker Arena Cross season.
Actually, I went to some
carrying
races at
on.
the Orleans Arena. It might have been the flat track race. It's been so long, but man, it was loud in there. And that was not a very big arena.
Yeah, that's one, you know, with the Kicker AMA Arena Cross Championship Series, John, we have the best indoor arena cross riders in the world.
Oh, I know it for a fact.
And whether they're doing 27-second laps in hockey arenas or they're doing a
27-second
minute
laps.
These guys are running 27-second laps. There is no rest for 18 to 24 laps.
Jeez.
It's just brutal. These guys are animals, and really a great representation of Kicker and how we live loud, how we like to.
And they're definitely loud in those arenas.
Yeah.
I know one of the other, events that you do are the flat track events too. I got to work one of those, with you. Actually, a couple of them down in Oklahoma City. How do these, the arena cross? How's that different from the flat track? I mean, what's the difference in the bikes and the style? I mean, just for curiosity.
The motocross stuff is, they do run. American Flat Track runs the AFT Parts Unlimited singles class presented by Kicker. Which is basically 450cc modified motocross bikes to run flat track, but they run an oval for the most part. We do run some TTs, but don't want to get into that right now. But they run an oval for the most part, short track, quarter mile, half mile, and 1 mile. And these bikes are specially modified to go around corners that are flat.
Very fast.
Yeah, very fast. Whereas the arena cross bikes, are just flat out dirt bikes. I mean, they're hucking these things 40 feet in the air and 75 feet across the doubles.
If you guys have never been to one of these events, I highly suggest you go to the website and find out where they're going to be near you, because there is never a dull moment. I mean, you talk about noise and smell and excitement and fun and Lauren.
It's kind of like Kicker, it's a full embodied experience, right? It's all the sensories. Get out and see us. Check it out. I think they're on Arena Cross is on Instagram at Arena Cross USA, or you can find some of the stuff on the Kicker website.
Yeah, you go to our event site and it's going to pull up everything that's going on.
Kicker.com.
And obviously with events, Master Tech, don't forget about that coming up in March. We got the Lone Star Throwdown coming up in Texas. Are you going down for that?
I am not, but I know some guys who are, and
I'm going to be there.
Excited.
I'll be down there for Lone Star Throwdown. I'm excited for that one.
That'll be awesome.
And Slamology's coming up before too much longer. Was that April? June. Okay, June this year.
Thank you.
Yep, so I'll be at that one as well. So we'll be out and about in a fun event near you. But the last question I have for you, Lauren.
Uh-oh.
Since I had my little mishap with my water and you're sitting in that chair, did Stephen wipe the water out of that chair before you sat in it?
No, I just sat down. I tried to wipe some of it out.
I thought I saw your eyes bug out when you sat down and said, I bet he just set in a whole bunch of water.
Yeah, it's all right. Dude, 2 weekends ago, we were in Kicker AMA Pro Arena Cross was in Grand Island, Nebraska. The high that day with the wind chill on Saturday was minus 36.
Minus 36.
So sitting in a little water in a warm studio, don't really care.
Well, you and I were both in Nebraska during that. I was actually in Lincoln visiting some family, and you were working your cold butt off in that event.
It was cold.
And I think you were telling me that not all the ventilation was working properly.
About half the heating system in the building was not working properly. But I'll give it to those fans. Special shout out, dude. Still probably 50% capacity.
That's
when
great.
It's that cold and right between two blizzards.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
When they're telling everybody not to get out, but hey, we're Kicker people. We don't care.
That's right. That's right. And it's a great testament to the living loud theory behind the Kicker AMA Pro Arena Cross Series. So just glad to be a part of it, glad to rep the brand, and
Well,
catch me out there. I don't know what my whole schedule is this year, but
someone will tell you.
someone will tell me. J-Dub.
Yep. JW will tell you since he runs all the events.
Right on.
Lauren, thank you for being such an
bet,
amazing
John.
ambassador and
Thanks
one of
so
my
much.
very good friends. And I can't wait to work an event with you again.
Yes, coming soon.
Jeremy, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. So guys, get out and see Lauren.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to
See you
continue
soon.
with this and
Carry on.
Hey, the chair's dry now.
Thanks.
How's your butt? That was funny. I just looked down and was like, oh yeah, like all the water on the bottom of the chair. So, you know, if you're going to put something near me, expect it to get broken, knocked over, or something like that. So, all right. So we're going to continue with a couple other fun parts of the show here. Steven's stealing my water, if you didn't see him sneaking off camera there. And put it on the floor where we'll never see it again. So, all right, we're going to go to questions. How's that sound? So we'd like to take your questions. Once again, support@kicker.com. If you guys get questions that aren't answered, if you guys have any suggestions for any shows, any special guests you'd like to see, feel free to give us those suggestions, or once again on a chat log up there, go ahead and type those in to good old Bill Frog. So normally we do 3 questions. Well, I've got one question here that I was reading. It's actually 2 parts. So we're going to count the one question as 2. We're going to fudge this together a little bit. You know what? I know I printed it out. I must have grabbed the wrong one. So hang on real quick. I've got it on my laptop, so I'm going to read it right from my laptop here in just a second. So as soon as I get it pulled up, that's what happens when you print out so many things on magnetism, that you tend to grab too many of the wrong things. So as I'm stalling here to get to this, 'cause these are actually a couple of really good questions. And here we go. All right, so questions. Let's go ahead and drop this down. I think I got this type so big I can't even see it. All right, so here we go. So I know all speakers need crossovers, but what do they do, and why are some built into the amps and some not? What's the difference? All right. So crossovers are really, they're kind of like a transmission or traffic cop. What a crossover does, it takes frequencies that are coming in, which may be full bandwidth from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and it's going to divide those frequency ranges up into each specific speaker, and it's going to get the operating range that it can handle. To give you an example, if I were to send 20 hertz at 500 watts into a 1-inch silk dome tweeter, I mean, common sense is going to tell you guys that's not going to survive that. So what a crossover does is it blocks the lower frequencies away from that tweeter to make sure it doesn't get those harmful low frequencies. By the same token, believe it or not, you can burn up woofers with too high a frequency. When you run any type of energy, it's got to have some place to go. It's got to be turned into heat, it's got to be turned into light, or it's got to be turned into motion. So if we send a ton of energy at 10K, so we send 500 watts at 10K to a woofer, the woofer is a big, heavy, massive device that can't move at 10K. It can't move back and forth. It can't dissipate that energy as motion, so it becomes heat. So yes, you can actually burn up woofers with too high of a frequency. So what the crossovers do is they get in there and they divide the frequencies. They're coming through the speaker wire, and they basically tell which speaker to go to. And once again, a properly designed crossover will give that speaker the precise operating range that it needs, whereas a improperly designed crossover, you might have gaps, you might have overlap. I mean, there's a lot of different things go wrong. So that is what a crossover does. It divides the frequencies up to the speakers so that they only play the frequencies that they can handle or that they're designed to play. Now, there are 2 different styles of crossovers. You have active crossovers and passive crossovers. Passive crossovers do not require power to operate. That's where the passive comes from. They are after the amplifier. They take the frequencies coming out of the amplifier and they split them up from there. So that is a passive crossover. An active crossover is built into the amplifier, or it's before the amplifier, that tells the output channels specifically what frequencies to produce. So active crossovers make the amplifier much more efficient. So why wouldn't everything have, active crossovers if they're better than passive crossovers? Oh, the other thing that's a nice advantage with active crossovers, they're adjustable. You can adjust the slope and you can adjust the crossover points, either high pass or low pass, or switch between all of them. So the disadvantage of having an entirely active crossover system is you need basically 1 channel for each output range. So in each channel. So you'll need 1 output channel of the amplifier, for the tweeter, one for the mid, one for the woofer, and if you have a stereo, you need another tweeter, mid, and woofer. So it requires more channels of amplification. That means more cost. That means more wiring involved, more patch cables, more chance for noise. So there are advantages to both. Now, most car audio systems today basically it's a hybrid system. It's partially active and partially passive, especially if you have a subwoofer. It's very cost effective to run a passive crossover between a mid-range and a tweeter. They don't, eat up a lot of power. They're not very expensive. They're fairly small. And once again, they're very easy to connect. Whereas if you try to put a passive crossover on a subwoofer, it becomes a very big coil of wire, which has more resistance. And once again, the amplifier is not as efficient because it's trying to produce all these frequencies and you're only using a section of that for each of the speakers. So that's the difference between active and passive. And that's why you have some of them built into amplifiers and some not. And speaking of amplifiers, the next question we have here, which is another great question, says, I would like to put an amplifier in my car, but I do not want to change the radio. And a lot of times you can't change the radio. I was told that I need an adapter to add an amplifier to my factory radio. What are the best ones on the market without getting really expensive? I want to make sure I get one that will not damage my radio. Are there any differences in them? And what you're talking about is called a line output converter, or commonly referred to as an LOC for short. So line output converter takes a high voltage, line level signal and drops it to a low voltage to go into the amplifier. Now these were very important, years ago when amplifiers would only take 1 or 2 volts of input and a 25 watt signal is 10 volts. The other thing that happens with a lot of the older amplifiers with the single-ended input, which means the RCA shields are all tied together and then tied to chassis ground, the output of that factory radio cannot be grounded to the chassis. So if you were merely to take the output of that radio and connect it to the RCA, you would overdrive the signal and you would short out that factory radio. That's why you needed the line output converter, sometimes called a high to low level converter. It would drop the voltage and it would isolate from ground. The cool thing is, with every kicker amplifier since 2010, we have something called FIT technology, FIT, fail-safe integration technology. That means all of our amplifiers will take at least 25 watts right into the RCA input, and the RCA inputs on the amplifier are isolated from chassis ground, so you're not going to short out that radio. So the best answer to tell you right now, with a kicker amplifier, you do not need a line output converter unless you've got a signal that's crossed over and you need to sum them together. You need some type of summing device or an interface, which we won't get into the weeds with the interfaces right now, but there are times when you need either or. But we do make a couple of very good line output converters. And why do we make line output converters if our amplifiers don't need them? Basically, there's 2 functions for the line output converters that we offer. One of them is they have resistance built in. So they've got 65 ohms of impedance built right into the line output converter, because some of the smart radios, if you were to connect those directly to the input of our amplifier or say somebody else's amplifier that's got a floating ground input, it doesn't have enough load, so that factory radio says, hey, there's no load, so therefore I need to shut off. Just like we talked about that question, can I run 3 of the 4 channels in the amplifier? If it's Class D, you have to run a load on all the channels, whether you run signal to it or not. So one of the things we do with those line output converters is we put a load in there which will satisfy that factory radio into thinking there's a speaker connected, and it will not burn up the outputs. Because in a factory system, if one of the speakers quits working, that radio has a chance of burning up if they don't shut that off. So that's why they build those protections into those radios, and that's why you have to have some type of load. So that's one of the things that the KISS lock does. It drops the signal basically from 25 volts down to about 4.5 volts for the input, and it isolates from ground, and it gives you the load. So it does 3 separate things. The KISS lock 2 does something else. It actually turns the DC offset, won't go into that in detail, but it will give you a switched 12 volt output without sending 12 volts into it. So it'll give you a remote turn on for an amplifier that needs a switched 12 volts input to turn them on. Once again, with our fail-safe integration technology from 2010, all of our amplifiers do not require a switched 12 volt in. They can get it right off the speaker leads and get the signal. So it really simplifies the installation, and it really works quite well. So great questions we had, and like I say, we could have gone down so many different paths with that. It's so hard to answer just one part of the question without going into a whole bunch of other things. But we need to do a couple other things. We got 3 things left to do tonight. We got to go over the fails, we got to go over the installs, and of course we got some things to give away. So I'm going to go to the other area of my laptop in just a second. I'll have you pull this up, Ern, because that's what you do quite well. All right, so close that down. So let's do the fails first. Why not? All right, so pull this up. Ernie, pull up the first fail on the laptop. What do we have here? Yeah, what a wiring mess. I mean, I have no idea. There are so many 12-volt adapters. When you start doing stuff like this, not only does it not look good, it's not safe. I mean, and who knows what the heck's going on. So definitely a wiring fail there, and that's from Car Audio Fails on Instagram. So a great little section of installs there, and I'm not sure where that all just went. There we are. All right, we're back. All right, here's another interesting one. I'll go ahead and make this larger so you can see it. Well, that didn't make the picture much bigger. And yes, that is one of our woofers. If you guys don't recognize that woofer, that is a Kicker ES woofer, and that was one of our export only that was only sold across the pond to Europe and some of those other countries. So that's why you probably don't recognize that woofer. Might think it's counterfeit. Hey, it could still be a counterfeit. We don't know, no matter what they do over there. But if you look at this amplifier, can anybody see what's going on? You see the 2 fans? Looks like they took a piece of, almost looks like bendable plywood, put it over the top of the amplifier, took the, or cardboard, Ernie says, and that's possibly cardboard too. Yeah, it is actually, now they see the edge. But they've taken the bottom off the amplifier and then put 2 fans in and cut a hole in the middle, probably for the air to escape or the air to be drawn in there and pulled out by the fans. If you have to do this to your amplifier, you seriously need to look at how your system is wired, because you're probably running too low of an impedance. And I'm really not sure what that, it looks like bicycle fenders they're using to fasten the cardboard to it. But yeah, once again, this is definitely a fail. Not only is it not mounted very well and looks like really crappy wire, but you should not have to add external fans onto your amplifiers to keep them operating. In fact, one of the things that can do is you can actually cool the portion of the amplifier off so well that where the heat is actually developed can actually burn up the amplifier even though you have fans on it, because it pulls heat out so quick that the thermistor, the part that tells the amplifier it's running too hot, doesn't actually work. Therefore, you will burn up the amplifier anyway. Here's a great use of the wrong connectors for the application. Once again, you're trying to put, it looks like 4-gauge wire into 18-gauge wire screw terminals. And they've literally taken the fork connectors and cut one side of them off. And if you look real closely, it looks like the power is almost ready to short out to the remote input, which means your amplifier will never shut off. But use the right connectors and use the right gauge wire for the amplifier. Use what it's designed for. That's kind of the biggest takeaway. And here's another big, I wouldn't say no, but another thing you guys need to make sure that you do is always route your wires safely. It looks like this is going to be your steering column, like the wires rubbing around. It almost looks like it's taped or wire tied to the steering column or whatever that happens to be, and then run behind the brake pedal back here. And of course, it looks like it might even interfere with the gas pedal. So make sure all your wires, when you run them, are safe. They're free of moving objects. They're not going to get burned. They're not going to get chafed. They're not going to be cut. If you're running your wires through a firewall or anything metal, make sure you use the proper grommets. So yeah, it's great wire. In fact, that's even our wire, I assume. I mean, it sure looks like our blue wire with the snakeskin coating, but it may not. It may just be a counterfeit, that kind of a look-alike. And yes, any ground is better than no ground. In this case, I would have to say no. You cannot ground your amplifier to the plastic panel and expect it to work. I don't understand. It's screwed down, but yeah, it's screwed to plastic. You might as well just screw it to the rubber tire if you really want to insulate it. But yep, definitely not a good install there or good wiring practices. And speaking of bad wiring practices, what in the world is going on here? I mean, all right, let's look at the fact that you got so many different wires. I mean, who knows what's going where? You do have some fuse holders in here, which is good, but I don't know what's going on here where those connections are. But more importantly, you see red and yellow wires, running together. Here's one of the things, if you guys don't follow marine applications, in a marine environment, the Coast Guard has deemed yellow as a ground wire. So in a boat, if you see a yellow wire, if they're wired to Coast Guard specifications, the yellow is going to be a ground. In this application, looks like they're using both yellow and red for power, and I'm not even sure where all the grounds are running, but what a mess. You got wires hanging out here doing nothing, and if that's connected somewhere else, it can, yeah, just not a good install. So that is definitely enough fails for one night, don't you think? All right. So next thing we want to do, we're going to go over the last little subject, which I'm like digging through my laptop here, and I keep hitting the wrong buttons. Amazingly enough. You'd think I know how to work this laptop by now. All right, so 24. I'm going to go to the installs. Now, there's a special install I want to feature here, and we played an install from Steve a little bit ago, Steve Barber, and his amazing creation that he did. I want to show you the pictures of this vehicle because, you know, people say that, you know, pride is not taken in these SPL vehicles. They're not built, you know, for cosmetics. But hats off to you, Steve, because this thing absolutely looks gorgeous. I love the stained plywood. In fact, I'm getting ready to build some home subwoofers myself doing this exact style, and mostly because I like the way the stained plywood looks. But, you know, great use. And I think those are the 9-inch, the SD9s, and you got 8 of those in each door and 4 of the bullet tweeters. So, and if you notice that, you know, everything's trimmed out very nicely, even the side glass, which I can assume is probably an inch thick in this vehicle. But great looking install on the door panel. Same thing on the roof. It's got a nice little mobile PA system on the roof of this vehicle. And you can see it's still in the modification process here with the framework for the front windshield being built. And it's not quite done yet, but what a great looking enclosure on top. And imagine that thing sounds good and is extremely loud. I do absolutely love the steering wheel, which, you know, in previous life was an L7S. I think that was a 12-inch. A great use of that speaker. But more importantly, if you guys look closely, and Steve can probably tell you more about this, you notice the plywood that's actually stacked on edge. So, you know, it's almost stack fab here on the dash, and that makes it extremely strong. But I just like the way it looks. And yes, he's got a nice fuse holder, easily accessible, and I'm sure everything is fused properly. You probably guys didn't even see the KX amplifier down here that's driving all the mid and high frequencies. He's got a couple of those, and of course, it's got a huge compilation of subwoofers in the back. And of course, you know, me and the lighting, we love the LEDs, love the lighting. Here it is with the new programmable LED lighting in the back with 6 of the L7. Those are 15s, aren't they, if I remember right, guys? Yep. JW said, yes, those are the 15s, or maybe that was Bill. I couldn't tell. But, yep, 9 of the 15s in the back of this thing. So that's why he's done all the reinforcement to the windows and the windshield and the roof on this thing. And here's another view with the doors open. You notice, you know, how nicely trimmed out the work is. But the other thing I really wanted to point out, look at his seat. Absolutely gorgeous work on the seat, Steve. I love the stack fab with that stained plywood. That looks really nice. It's very tastefully done. I bet that thing is just louder than all get out. I can't wait to hear it, and hopefully it's going to be at Slamology where I can hear it. And of course, another view on the top with the front firing speakers. He's got 4 of the tweeters and 2 of the mids firing forward, and another 2 firing diagonally, and then 4 of the mids and 4 of the tweeters down each side. What a great vehicle, and once again, fantastic work, and thanks for, you know, all your support. Really appreciate it, Steve, and can't wait to hear it. And there's another view of that roof rack, which probably the loudest roof rack in the world at the moment. So, too cool. Well, thanks for that. So that kind of covers our installs, it covers our fails, it covers our questions. We had a great discussion on magnets. Once again, if you guys have any other questions on the magnets or, you know, operation or design, feel free to research it on the internet. There's a lot of good information, but there's also some bad information. So read through that information with a grain of salt and take away from it what you will. And you can get lost in it. They really go into the weeds on some of that and some of the formulas and some of the theories. It's really, really interesting. But you really have to be ready to dig deep and not be interrupted. So I guess we need to give some stuff away. We're looking at 9:07. We're running just a little bit late. Here I was worried about we wouldn't have enough to fill the night. But then again, you guys know how I like to talk and get rambling. So guess that's par for the course. So, all right, the third prize winner is, I guess I get to do all 3 of these by myself, and no one else is here to help me. Steven's actually like off in the corner. I'm not sure what he's doing over there. He's like trying to ignore me. So I'm on my own here. Thanks a lot, Steven. All right, so third prize winner is, and make sure you watch for an email from Bill Frog. You're going to ask for your name, your address, your phone number, and your shirt size. and make sure it's a shipping address, not a P.O. box. Third place winner is going to be, or the second runner-up is going to be Gary Q from Arizona. So Gary, congratulations. Watch for that email from Bill. You're going to get the green kicker tumbler, the koozie, and the t-shirt. Which brings us to the first runner-up, or the second prize, which is going to get the EB400, the wireless earbuds that are weather-resistant, the koozie, and the t-shirt. Second place winner is going to be Bill, drumroll please. That's going to be Robert F. from Texas. Hey, Robert, congratulations. And since you're in Texas, you're pretty close. If you want to drive on up here and get a tour of the facility and come by and say hi and pick up your prize in person, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, we're happy to see you. Come on up, and we'll give you a great tour of the place. You guys really got to see our museum if you haven't seen it. So any of you guys, if you're in the Stillwater area, Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, come by and say hi and come by and check out our museum. And we got a really cool store there, too, where you can buy all the promo stuff, the T-shirts, the earbuds, the headphones. And yes, I'm stalling, waiting for Bill to get ready to post. The grand prize winner for tonight, you're going to get the BF100. That's the Bullfrog waterproof Bluetooth speaker. I mean, those things literally float. You can actually power them up, play them, throw them in the water. So the grand prize winner tonight is going to be, drum roll please, it's going to be Howard H. from New York. Yep, you're a little ways from here. It's probably cold up there in New York too. So Howard H., congratulations. Congratulations to all three of you guys for your support. And thank you everybody out there for tuning in to us every other Tuesday night. Thanks for always being there for us. Thanks for showing your support. Thanks for living loud, and tune in 2 weeks and we will be back again. And I certainly hope your weather is better than it's been around here, because we've had a lot of ice and snow. Actually, no matter where it was, Nebraska or Oklahoma, it was bad no matter what. But we made it. Ernie got frozen for a couple days at his house. He'll tell you that story someday, I'm sure, too. But thanks for tuning in, guys. Have a great evening, and stay tuned for Living Loud with Andy, and give him some heck. Keep him on his toes. So thanks again, guys, and we will see you in 2 weeks.